It's sequel time! A couple months ago, I put out my 5 records to get you into industrial video. That episode was intended as a way of providing the uninitiated who watch my new wave and synth pop episodes some easier entry points to the world of industrial through offshoot and adjacent genres such as industrial rock and EBM. Well, the response to that episode was unbelievable. Many of you loved it. But there was a small faction of genre snobs and keyboard warriors angrily asserting that the only way you can experience industrial is to rip the Band-Aid and dive headlong into its early pioneers. Well, today I am back with part 2, excited to cover one record that I teased last time, as well as some of those early innovators. So stick around, because today we're going to discuss trolling jazz funk bargain bin record buyers, bewildering Swifties, and cooking risotto? This is 5 more records to get you into industrial. Industrial music is one of the most influential and enduring genres of the past 50 years, known for its aggressive mechanical sound and its exploration of themes like alienation, technology, and dystopia. Its importance lies not only in its sonic innovation, but also in its role as a cultural response to the rapid industrialization and dehumanizing forces of modern life. Early industrial pioneers pushed boundaries by incorporating non-traditional instruments, found sounds, and harsh noise into their music, challenging the conventional idea of what music could be. Where punk music would say, here's a chord, this is another, here's a third, now form a band. Industrial said, here's a metal pipe, this is a bike wheel, and here's some corrugated iron. Now, hit them together and make a song. And so, in the spirit of hitting things together, our first record today, Einstürzend Neubauten, Halber Mensch. Einstürzend Neubauten. Halber Mensch, or Half Person in English, is the 3rd studio album by German industrial band Einstürzend Neubauten, released on the 2nd of September 1985 by Some Bizarre Records in the UK, Rough Trade in the US, and What's So Funny About GmbH in Germany. Did I say that right? Okay. In order to truly appreciate what's going on with this record, we got to talk about Berlin. During the 80s, West Berlin was a city in a state of emergency. It was a creative melting pot for sub and pop culture, aspiring amateurs, and some future global superstars. Before the Iron Curtain fell, Berlin was a walled-in island full of artists, hedonists, and squatters, all living on the edge of life. From this potent melting pot, countless experimental groups emerged, including EN. I'm just going to refer to them as EN from here so I don't trigger anyone. The original lineup included Blixa Bargeld on vocals and guitar, NU Unra, custom percussion, Beat Bartel on bass, and Gudrun Gut on electronics. However, Bartel and Gut left early on, with FM Einheit soon joining and becoming a pivotal member alongside Bargeld and Unruh. The band's name, meaning collapsing new buildings, reflected their anarchic aesthetic and deep skepticism towards modernist architecture and post-war German society. Blixa Bargeld would also become known for his longtime role as guitarist for Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, serving for a time as their philosophical and artistic leader. But that's a story for another video. Getting back to EN, their early albums such as Collapse and Zyknügen des Petienten OT were unremittingly harsh, with Bargeld's vocals shouted and screamed over the din of banging and scraping metal percussion. Speaking on EN's early days in the excellent B-movie Lust and Sound in West Berlin doc, Bargeld would say, quote, "We played in secret forgotten spaces in motorway bridges or under railways, places that have something magic about them and have incredible acoustic qualities. If you're sitting inside a steel girder that's maybe 40 meters long and you can hear trucks whizzing along above you, it's difficult to develop something connected to the peace movement. We didn't just work in the hollow spaces inside motorway bridges, we worked with absolutely everything imaginable, and especially with things that were completely unimaginable. From the beginning, EN distinguished themselves through their use of unconventional instruments, scrap metal, power tools, and found objects, which they used to create visceral, abrasive soundscapes. Their early performances were notorious for their intensity and destructiveness. One infamous 1981 show in London involved the band drilling into the stage floor of the Institute of Contemporary Arts, nearly causing a structural collapse. The band was also notorious for starting fires on stage. Bargeld often took a tray of lighter fluid and threw a match on it before squirting even more fluid, watching the flames erupt. Eventually, the club management would catch on, preemptively calling in the fire brigade. Speaking on this, Bargeld would say, quote, "The fire thing was moving faster than we were. We'd turn up to gigs and they'd already be standing there with the fire extinguishers. That was something we had to stop as it had become show business. Just showing the audience a petrol canister filled with water became enough to terrify them. These days, thankfully, the only thing being toasted is a tablespoon of peppercorn, as Bargeld regularly cooks everything from braised Savoy cabbage to risotto over on his Patreon." In these videos, the timbre of the metallic ding sound of when the spoon hits the side of the pan is just chef's kiss. Despite the chaos that surrounded their early performances, they were also meticulous sound architects, committed to pushing the limits of what music could be. And this is what brings us to Halber Mensch. Produced by Gareth Jones, their third album was recorded at Berlin's legendary Hansa Studios between '83 and '85. Overlapping sessions Gareth was also running, working with Depeche Mode on albums such as Some Great Reward. As with their early albums, EN constructed many of the instruments used on Halber Mensch themselves, fashioning percussion tools out of shopping carts, steel metal, and power drills. However, with this record, they were keen to push the envelope even further. During the recording, they reportedly destroyed parts of the studio, including ripping the doors off hinges to use as sound sources. Producer Gareth Jones later remarked that Neubauten were more like a construction crew than a band. The album opens with the necrotic title track, Halber Mensch, featuring these haunting choral chants of Halber Mensch, Halber Mensch, over and over, provided by a Japanese women's choir. You keep waiting for the band to come in and start playing or hitting stuff, but they never do. Eventually, the choir drops out, leaving Blixa all alone as the sole voice before coming back, this time swirling into an eerie, nightmarish crescendo. The accompanying 1986 film by Japanese director Sogo Ishii, also titled Halber Mensch, further explored these dystopian themes with surreal, often disturbing visuals set against the band's performances in Japan. Yugung, Futter mein Ego, or Flatter My Ego, blends relentless, hammering percussion with lead singer Blixa Bargeld's manic vocal delivery. The title refers to a tale from Chinese folklore about a man who tries to move mountains, an allegory for futility and persistence that resonates with the band's ethos. My personal favorite, Letztes Beast, Am Himmel, or Last Beast in the Sky, feels like a mechanical requiem, serving as a haunting finale to Halber Mensch. As it slowly builds, it encapsulates the band's shift from their early industrial noise roots towards a more nuanced and atmospheric sound, which they would continue to develop on future albums. Easily the most accessible song on the record, The juxtaposition of the song's delicate instrumentation with its themes of decay and desperation underscores the album's exploration of addiction and its consequences. This is a reissue. Inner sleeve. Next record, Nights Are Ebb, That Total Age. Switching to the UK, here comes this video's pop record. I teased this one last time, but stay with me. There will be some connections as we move on. That Total Age is the debut album by British EBM group Nights Are Ebb, released on the 11th of May, 1987 by Mute in the UK and Geffen in the US. All right, let's roll things back a bit. Nights Are Ebb were formed in 1982 by Chelmsford, Essex school friends Vaughn Bon Harris as programmer, vocals, and percussion, David Goodday, also on percussion, Simon Granger as the only guy in town that had a synth for Bond to use and functioning as the group's art director, and Douglas McCarthy as their slogan-chanting vocalist. Nights Are Ebb's music was a distillation of electronic tribal aggression and had at its core a metallic and militant funk, a legacy from bands such as DAF that the members grew up with. Quote, "The clubs we knew were disco and funk," McCarthy would tell The Guardian. "It's in the DNA of the area." The underage Goodday would be smuggled beneath a coat into nights at the Canvey Island gold mine, while babyface McCarthy went to the same venues under 10 disco on a Saturday afternoon. It didn't last long. "We all got rushed out because someone had stabbed someone," he remembers. The undercurrent of violence in the early days of Thatcher's Britain shaped them in their teens. Notoriously, Essex has a reputation, and we bore the brunt of that insecure machismo, McCarthy says. If anyone looked different, it was, "You're a bender and I'm gonna punch you in the face." So, armed with a cheap EDP Wasp synth and various members taking turns to whack John a bin that McCarthy's metalworker father had created, the embryonic Nights Are Ebb practiced for hours in Harris's mum's house. The band's first gig was a disaster, with the synth playing at the wrong speed, causing McCarthy to freeze up on stage. Eventually, the group would find their groove, having been inspired by a trip to London to see Nick Cave's The Birthday Party. McCarthy would say, "I realized we had to have our own identity. I just have to go fucking mental." The takeaway basically was, fuck everyone. Nights Are Ebb's aesthetic was as tough and provocative as their music, both satirizing and embracing the insecure machismo they encountered in their native Essex. Granger would take a razor to a local bookshop, slicing pages out of art books on constructivism, taking the stolen imagery home to photograph and turn into blocky, propaganda-style images that adorn the covers of the album That Total Age. This extended to donning military garb and buzz cuts. Quote, "We went to the enemy offices all crowded out," McCarthy says. "Thanks to the jodhpurs, halfway up the stairs I twisted a nut. Ow, wait. Ow, boys. I couldn't work out which way to turn it. We opened the door and threw vinyl at everyone in the office and hobbled off." That totalitarian aesthetic may jar today, but Nights Are Ebb were not alone, as back then defiantly left-wing, anti-racist groups would frequently deploy all kinds of taboo imagery, including punks such as Susie Sue and the Sex Pistols, and experimental pioneers Throbbing Gristle. Yes, we're gonna get to them shortly. Produced by Phil Harding, That Total Age is a collection of hard-hitting club bangers that sound like the Red Army doing calisthenics in hell. The album opens with Fitness to Purpose, with a mechanically incessant drum beat and a fat analog bass hook, setting an immediate emphasis on energetic, rhythmic grooves. Douglas McCarthy's commanding vocals compare battlefields and bedrooms with "In the battle, in the bed, the pair is in heat, the heat." Without a doubt, the most iconic track on the album, Join in the Chant, features militaristic chants such as Muscle and Hate and Force is Machine, as represented via the cover cymbals. There's a vintage clip of this song that I just love where the band are on stage opening for Depeche Mode on the World Violation Tour, giving it their all. Bon is flapping his arms like he's about to take off while McCarthy's prowling the stage under daylight in the sweltering Sacramento sun. We'll link to this below. Without a doubt, anytime Join in the Chant is played, it's a bona fide dance floor filler. When I was in the 9th grade, I used to listen to these Saturday night live-to-air broadcasts on my local alternative radio station. I kept hearing this infectious track with this killer bass line and this guy screaming. Problem was, they would never identify it, and 14-year-old me wanted to go out and buy it. Well, fortunately, we just got a home computer, so with the power of dial-up, I emailed the station providing a cursory description of whatever fragments of the lyrics I could recall. Took a few days, but you can imagine the sense of accomplishment when the DJ wrote me back that the song I was looking for was called Murderous. Take that, Shazam! This is my original CD copy on Geffen. Love the art on the disc, booklet. And this is the original pressing from the 80s. The gray on one side and red on the other. Inner sleeve. And for that one guy, yes, it's obvious I didn't buy this in the 80s. My DeLorean is in the shop. That total age, 2X. First record. Second record. And for anyone who doesn't know this, the track Warsaw Ghetto was criminally removed from the Geffen release on CD. But if you don't know this one, go check it out. We're not done with the ebb yet. Let Your Body Learn. Let Your Body Learn some more. Join in the chant. Used to have a full-size poster of this image somewhere. And Murderous. Clearly I was in Ebhead. And so for more on the early days of Thatcher's Britain, Cabaret Voltaire, Red Mecca. Red Mecca is the 4th studio album by Sheffield industrial band Cabaret Voltaire, released on the 17th of August, 1981 through Rough Trade Records. Red Mecca stands as a landmark exercise in atmosphere and densely layered production, capturing the political tension and sonic experimentation of the early 80s post-punk and industrial scenes. Emerging in Sheffield, England, a city torn between the past and the future, the band, then composed of Richard H. Kirk, Stephen Mallender, and Chris Watson, crafted a record that balanced harsh electronics, tape manipulations, dub influences, and cryptic vocals to comment on the socio-political climate of the time. Speaking on their surroundings, growing up in Sheffield in the excellent Synth Britannia doc, Kirk would say, "At night you'd hear distant booming noises, which would probably be something like a drop forge or steam hammer. You certainly knew you were on the edge of heavy industry and on the influence of TV. I remember watching loads of science fiction and things in the 60s like Doctor Who and Quartermass, And all these strange things seem to happen in old gasworks or industrial environments. There was another world about it. The title, Red Mecca, itself is a pointed juxtaposition of Islamic religious connotations with Cold War era communist symbolism, reflecting the global unrest and ideological conflict that preoccupied the band. Speaking on 81's Inner City Riots, Kirk would say, "People say the Specials' Ghost Town was the soundtrack to the unrest of that year, but to others, Red Mecca was that sound." That insurrection on the streets had found its way into the music. The rise of surveillance culture, the rise of the right wing in America, the fundamentalist Christians, the revolution in Iran, the general feeling things were moving to the right. Split Second Feeling exemplifies the group's transition from industrial experimentation to a more rhythm-driven proto-EBM style. There's guitars, but they're so mutated with effects that they sound like synths. Its pulsing bass line and sparse yet insistent percussion reflect the influence of both post-punk minimalism while looking ahead to the emerging electronic dance music, including acts like Front 242 and Nights Are Ebb. Red Mask starts with a far-off distant sample or radio transmission before a shuffly beat ushers in Malender's cut-up word collage. Sharp Boy says, "Sex boy pure and simple," whispers how wise and understanding. "They eat it up, what else is there? I can't make them stop." This Dadaist and music concrete collage-like construction features blasts of flanged noise, transformed guitars, and cut-up lyrics evoking a real sense of paranoia and urban decay. You don't get Skinny Puppy without Red Mask. Spread the Virus is a highlight for its urgent beat, hypnotic bass line, and Malender's half-spoken, half-chanted vocal delivery. Its lyrics and title evoke biological metaphors for ideological or political contagion, highly relevant to Cold War fears of infiltration and subversion. The track gained underground popularity and became a staple in alternative clubs with its infectious groove and sinister tone, showing the way forward for acts, again, like 9 Inch Nails and Front 242. The album's centerpiece, 1,000 Ways, is a haunting 10.5-minute slow burn journey that melds bleak melodies with clattering electronic beats and suggests a clear connection to other krautrock epics. It offers a sense of uneasy closure, as if retreating deeper into an uncertain world rather than emerging from it. This track encapsulates the overall feel of Red Mecca, an uneasy journey through shadowy geopolitics and urban decay. The mood is claustrophobic but compelling, drawing listeners into a sonic environment that mirrors the chaos of early Thatcher-era Britain and the lingering dread of the Cold War. Critically, Red Mecca is often hailed as Cabaret Voltaire's masterpiece. While it didn't achieve mainstream success, it became a touchstone in underground circles and has been cited as a major influence by artists and genres ranging from Skinny Puppy and 9 Inch Nails to a good portion of the 90s Warp Records roster. Its blend of experimental audio collage and rhythmic accessibility marked it as a key transitional work, bridging the raw aggression of post-punk with the emergent possibilities of electronic music. While remaining a consistent underground force over the years, Cabaret Voltaire would see modest commercial success with the single Sensoria and exposure to an even wider audience. That time, a Taylor Swift fan alarmingly discovered their hypnotic grooves after a pressing plant error.
70 billion people of Earth. Really hardy. Really hardy.
We'll link to that story below. Over the years, the band's lineup and style evolved, but they remained a key force in shaping avant-garde and underground music through their innovative approach to sound and technology. Original UK pressing. Inner sleeve. Next record, Throbbing Gristle, 20 Jazz Funk Greats. Now we're getting serious. There's no way I could leave out the proto-industrial record from one of the most influential experimental bands that have ever existed. I briefly mentioned them in the intro to part 1, and many people commented asking for this, so here it is. 20 Jazz Funk Greats is the third studio album by British industrial music group Throbbing Gristle, released in December 1979 by the band's own Industrial Records label. Formed in the mid-70s by Genesis P-Orridge, Peter Sleazy Christopherson, Cozy Fanny Tootie, and Chris Carter, and initially conceived as a sonic experiment, TG was born out of a desire to create a new, radical form of music that defied traditional genres and expectations. The talent here was stacked. The members of TG had backgrounds in art, performance, and avant-garde music, and quickly became known for their confrontational live shows, which often blurred the boundaries between performance art, noise, and experimental sound. As an aside, Christopherson should particularly be highlighted for his notable work in multiple mediums, including as third member of the graphic design collective Hypnosis, responsible for album art for groups like Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, and as a video director for artists such as Nine Inch Nails and Rage Against the Machine. Adopting a name that was Yorkshire slang for a male erection, Throbbing Gristle were actually born out of the disillusion of the experimental performance art group Coom Transmissions. Coom was formed in the early 70s, and their work evolved after a move from Hull to Hackney, exploring the intersection of art, sexuality, and provocative themes, including male castration, phallic symbolism, and tampon sculptures. You know, the usual stuff. One controversial exhibition took place at London's Institute of Contemporary Arts in 1976. Yes, the same place Einstürzende Neubauten would nearly collapse years later. Following this London performance and being dubbed Wreckers of Civilization by a rather conservative MP, Coom disbanded, but the members would then pivot and continue to pursue their interests in a new medium, music. And so Throbbing Gristle was formed, embracing their fascination with noise, rhythm, and non-musical sounds. Speaking on this time, Christopherson would say, Throbbing Gristle came about because I was part of a performance art collective called Coom with Genesis and Cozy, and we decided that the art world was too up its own ass and refined, and we wanted to bring our message to young people who would be more willing to go to a concert than they would be to go to an art show. TG built a recording studio in Hackney, which they dubbed the Death Factory, where they would experiment with all kinds of sounds, challenging how you could be creative and what materials you could use. They added guitar pickups onto an old bass guitar. Carter built his own modular synthesizer kit. Christopherson would employ William Burroughs' tape splicing methods, hooking up the tapes to a keyboard that would then play the sounds as an early example of sampling. Speaking on conventional music, Genesis would say rock bands were kind of trapped as soon as they had a drummer. Using Western European patterns, what's the point in doing something that's been done for decades? TG would choose to warp and mutate their rhythms, making them fairly unrecognizable, and they would release their early works through their own label, Industrial Records. Their debut album, the Second Annual Report, was a raw and abrasive collection of dissonant industrial noise, which became foundational to the genre. By the late 1970s, Throbbing Gristle had developed a reputation for pushing boundaries, using non-traditional instruments, tape manipulation, and field recordings to create dense, unsettling soundscapes. 20 Jazz Funk Greats remains their most accessible yet ambitious album, marking a clear progression from their previous works, showcasing a more experimental yet listenable blend of ambient, funk, and industrial elements. The album's cover photo shows the nattily dressed band, white disco jacket, comfy slacks, mini skirt, stood amid flowers on a cliff top, considerably off-brand for an industrial group. The joke behind this subtle image is that TG put this out in hopes that in the future someday, someone would pick this up in a cheapo bin and think that they were getting a jazz funk record. But in reality, they're actually getting a throbbing gristle record. The chosen scene of natural beauty was Beachy Head in Sussex, the same spot where The Cure's Close to Me music video was shot, as well as select scenes in Just Like Heaven. Beachy Head is infamous as the premier suicide spot in all of England. The rover on the front was intended to symbolize a couple's abandoned vehicle prior to the deed. In 1981, TG reissued the cover in black and white with a staged female dead body at their feet, with what's implied to be a penis, as part of a 5-album box set. So much for subtle. Musically, this is the farthest thing from jazz funk. Instead, we get 11 tracks of explorative timbres, tape hiss, screeching violins, alongside sometimes some rather tranquil and tempered sounds. Second track, Beachy Head, teeters on the edge of the aforementioned cliff, a contrast between serenity and dread, something future instrumental groups like Boards of Canada would continue to explore. Hot on the Heels of Love mixes pulsing rhythms with eerie, otherworldly melodies and these whip-crack metallic sounds and Cozy's unsettling whispered vocals. Nestled towards the end of the album is the track What a Day, which plods forward with a menacing bass pulse and these strange textures weaving in and out of the soundscape. Over top of this, you get Genesis's voice shouting and bellowing, what a day, all day, over and over, fairly atonally. Speaking on this one, Genesis would comment, that track is based on going to Broadway Market in Hackney and hearing two old ladies talking. One of them was going, oh, I had an awful day. I had a terrible day. All day, it was just awful. It stuck in my head because it was so vibrant and funny, and yet at the same time, it didn't really tell me anything. Just this complaining, whining voice. And so I stole them. I stole the old ladies. TG would ultimately disband in 1981 after a decade of groundbreaking and often controversial work. Their decision to stop making music together came as a result of growing personal tensions, creative differences, and the strain of constantly pushing the boundaries of art and music. Christofferson would say the following, we ended TG because we felt it had become a pastiche of itself and we'd taken it as far as we wanted to take it without it becoming some kind of demon or beast that was not totally within our control. 20 Jazz Funk Greats remains a landmark album in the history of experimental music. It stands as a testament to Throbbing Gristle's ability to challenge musical norms while simultaneously exploring the intersections of art, culture, and technology. The album's influence can be heard in a wide range of genres, from industrial to electronic and even hip-hop, and it remains a cult favorite among fans of avant-garde and experimental music. Reissue vinyl. Comes with a copy of Industrial News. Cozy's Fanny. So, where do we go from here? Last record for today, Coil. Horse Rotorvator. When compiling this list, I just knew I had to end it here. Despite widespread acclaim, Coil remain fairly undiscovered, but they get some people extremely excited. Coil's work was highly experimental and blended many diverse genres. The group initially began as a solo moniker for Jeffrey Rushton, aka John Balance, eventually joined by Peter Sleazy Christopherson, who he'd worked with through band Psychic TV after Throbbing Gristle split. Jeff, aka John, and Peter, aka Sleazy, would become life partners and eventually left Psychic TV to focus exclusively on Coil in 1983. Described on their debut EP, How to Destroy Angels, as ritual music for the accumulation of male sexual energy, Coil were a group that constantly experimented and evolved. But to truly understand what Coil are about, I'll have to set up some prologue and tell a personal story. Let's talk about art. Per the dictionary definition, art can act as a level of indirection for the human experience. Instead of communicating one's thoughts and feelings and perceptions directly, you can convey them indirectly through your art. Through art, we can more safely explore a wider scope of situations, feelings, desires, and fears than we could achieve in a first-hand way. It's this sort of communication that's essential to us as social creatures, because art is a way for us to share a vast array of experiences with one another in a subtle and profound way. Much like the visual arts, music can either be designed to be familiar, like a verse, chorus, verse pop song structure, or it can be designed to achieve some other purpose, to challenge, provoke, to confuse the listener, or to get them into a desired headspace, to push boundaries. Despite the persistence of the golden rules of pop, some musicians have always been there to buck against those patterns. My first taste of Coil came when I discovered their second album, Horse Rotorvator, at my local public library in the mid-90s. At this point, I knew one of the members had apparently been in the first industrial band ever, and I had read an article in Details magazine where Trent Reznor had name-dropped them as an influence. So, I signed out the cassette for a week, popped it into my Walkman, and was immediately greeted with the kaleidoscopic acid trip that is its first track, charmingly titled The Anal Staircase. The beat kind of reminded me of Nine Inch Nails' Soft Cell cover, Memorabilia, or the Downward Spiral track, Mr. Self-Destruct, with its harsh beats and sample collage. It was pop music, but abrasive pop music. Now, despite digging the groove, there was something darker there that I couldn't place, and I found myself just a little bit uncomfortable with the title. Like, was this song about perversion? And if I liked it, what exactly did that say about me? I tried getting into the other songs, but between the dark themes and creepy patchwork of the samples, it just kind of made me feel uneasy, and I ended up returning the tape the next week. This album did elicit a response that I wasn't used to, and I think that response of discomfort was something that Coil was very good at and that Christopherson refined over his years in TG and Coom, just a way of provoking the listener. Take the cover art, for example. Looks rather tranquil and tame at first glance, but just what is a Horse Rotorvator? About the theme, Balance stated, Horse Rotorvator was this vision I've had of this mechanical flesh thing that plowed up the earth, and I really did have a vision of it. A real, horrible, burning, dripping, jaw-like vision in the night. The four horsemen of the apocalypse killed their horses and used their jawbones to make this huge earth-moving machine. Taking a closer look, that macabre description is right there on the album cover in small font text. The title actually has a second, more grounded but equally dark meaning. That seemingly innocuous photo, it was the site of the July 20th, 1982 Regent Park IRA bombings in London. During the event, horses and soldiers were blown up, described by Balance as a bizarre and sick picture. Subversive callback to 20 jazz funk greats, anyone? From the onset, this album hits you with a multitude of mechanized loops, some musical and some quite atonal or abrasive. There's an incessant darkness and themes of the occult and death running throughout the music. Ostia, The Death of Pasolini, is a haunting and introspective track that serves as both a tribute and a meditation on the violent and tragic death of queer Italian filmmaker and poet Pier Paolo Pasolini. Balance fixated on the idea that Pasolini anticipated his own demise in his art. Had he come to terms with it, and might he even have wanted to die this way? By invoking Pasolini's death, Coil elevates the tragedy to a broader commentary on the destruction of visionary artists and the societal forces that seek to suppress their radical, truth-seeking voices. Additionally, back in 1986, AIDS was impacting the lives of many of Balance's friends. The lyrics of Ostia evoke themes of martyrdom, sexuality, and the complex intersection of art and politics, mirroring the final moments of Pasolini's life. Slur is an atmospheric piece that combines dark, minimalistic electronics with a sense of unease and intimacy. The track begins with a slow, pulsating rhythm and an eerie, almost mechanical soundscape that gradually builds in intensity. Featuring Mark Almond on backing vocals, the lyrics are cryptic and delivered in a whispered, almost hypnotic manner, reinforcing the track's sense of isolation and tension. Horse Rotorvator's pummeling opener and single, The Anal Staircase, like the band's debut album Scatology, was banned in major retailers across their native United Kingdom because of what the title references. The song contrasts erotic joy with found recordings of giggling and a backwards pitch-shifted loop of Stravinsky's The Rite of Spring. This frigative soundscape elicits uncomfortable jolts of static electricity from individually gleeful elements. My favorite is how it ends with the sample of one kid saying, "Get off of me!" and the other kid saying, "No!" Speaking in a 1991 interview, John Balance would say, "The Anal Staircase is tied up with the tantric concept of Kundalini." John Peel phoned us and said he liked the song, but he could not play it due to the sound of children screaming in the background. He had also heard that it was recordings of the Moors murders, Myra Hindley and Ian Brady in the background, but neither of it is true. What you hear is the sound of a friend of ours playing with his child, and neither is there any recording of the Moors murders there. The whole thing sounds suspicious, but it really is just innocent play. People are so hysterical. Speaking to the Quietus in 2014, Trent Reznor would say of Coil, "If it's not immediately obvious, Horse Rotorvator was deeply influential on me. What they did to your senses, what they could do with sound, what John was doing lyrically. The exotic darkness of them permeated their work." Reznor also named his side project How to Destroy Angels after the 17-minute 1984 Coil epic of the same name, while Christofferson and Balance remixed Nine Inch Nails a number of times throughout the 90s. Coil would continue for another 2 decades, putting out diverse albums incorporating acid house, glitch, and dark ambient. There's a myriad of releases, and some fine folks have put together a few flowcharts to help guide newcomers. During the late 80s, they would get heavy into the club scene, taking lots of ecstasy as a means of seeking out a different kind of intimacy as a result of the ongoing AIDS crisis. This led to John turning to alcoholism as a come-down method. Eventually, John would take things too far in his continual desire to look into the abyss, leading to his tragic death in November of 2004. Christofferson would continue the project, releasing the brilliantly bittersweet and eerily prophetic The Ape of Naples in 2005. It was through this incredible album that I eventually circled back to rediscovering Coil's catalog, including Horse Rotorvator. And this time, those once dark and uncomfortable themes finally clicked. Relating to this, I think this quote from John is fairly apt. Fear of the dark is wrong. In fact, it's comforting. Light, illumination, comes from within the darkness. These days, Coil's music is still being released posthumously. Christofferson began the Threshold Archives project years before he also passed in 2010, with the intention of emptying the vaults and presenting music to the fans for years to come. However, questions of rights and quality control are a huge can of worms and a subject for another video. Coil and Throbbing Gristle have had a long and enduring influence on a host of progressive music well after they stopped being active. Christofferson hopes the influence of these projects is to show people you don't necessarily need 3 chords to start a band, as they used to say in the punk days. Your training doesn't matter as long as you've got inspiration. Original 1987 vinyl. This is a Netherlands pressing. Blue. So, that was a long one. It's gonna do it for today. Obviously, there are many more classic albums and artists I could have listed. I also shortlisted SPK, The Young Gods, Frontline Assembly. For this episode, I try to cover some of the groups teased in part 1 with a heavier focus on the UK this time. For further insights into Coil, as well as other experimental groups such as Current 93 and Nurse with Wound, I highly recommend you check out England's Hidden Reverse, a secret history of the esoteric underground. If you enjoyed this video, kindly give it a thumbs up. And be sure to subscribe to not miss out on any of my upcoming content, including artist-specific episodes planned on several industrial groups. Are you familiar with all of the albums I covered? What are your favorite industrial albums? What did I mispronounce, forget to cover, or get wrong? Let me know down in the comments, as well as if you'd like to see a part 3 to this list, and I'll be sure to cover this classic band. Thanks for watching. You can see more of my videos right here. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you guys in the next one.